Just how intense was the home environment for Purdue when the Badgers knocked them off?
Did Craig Smith just save his job?
I at least got exactly what I wanted out of Sunday's All-Star game.
3 primary cuts of Kendall Fuller, Raheem Mostert, and Durham Smythe.
Just not sure we're going to see hockey as good as that USA-Canada game for a long time.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
The vibes remain immaculate.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers.
The historic setting, the historic show. I mean, there was so much hype going into number 1 versus number 2, first time in SEC history, and the Tigers take care of business. Obviously, they beat Alabama. And it's just no matter what angle you look at, this is just an incredible victory, an incredible moment for Bruce Pearl and these Auburn Tigers. Lindsay.
Pour one out for the coaches poll, because everybody cared about the coaches poll for like 4 days, and now it's all dead to everybody again.
But what a 4-day stretch for the coaches poll. Though.
Hey, that's the greatest 4-day stretch coach poll's ever had, honestly.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
The big thing to me here was like 9-point victory, right? But 94-85. It honestly didn't feel like it was that close. Now, granted, there's times when it was tied, mind you. This was the first time Alabama has not led a single minute of a game all year. The best they could do, they dropped a kill shot on Auburn, a 10-0 run. They tied it up, and then Auburn pulled away. Now, I want to say the stat was like in the end, in clutch time, Auburn was like 8 of 10 from the floor, and Bama was like 4 of 13 or something like that. And it's just, they came out and gave you theoretically the second best or best team in the country, depending on your poll you use, came out and gave you the absolute best they could do in their house.
Yeah.
And you almost won by double digits. Dominant.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I do think Alabama's the second best team in the country. And I think I'm excited that we get to see this again in a few weeks. And Neville, more on that in a second. But I just think the message that Auburn sends over and over and over again, it's just anytime we say, like, are we expecting too much of this team? They find a way to say, no, you're not, because we have the chance to do something historic. Like they're that good. And the fact that their 2 losses so far are Duke and Florida, 2 teams that are going to be highly seeded in the NCAA tournament. And they're highly ranked in all of these polls, whichever one you want to look at. And then you just look at the remaining schedule, not to give too much away. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but it gets considerably easier. And your margin of error has grown a little bit because of what you did in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. And I mean, we're talking about, multiple championships that are on the table here with the SEC regular season. I think they're going to be in a prime spot for the SEC tournament. And then I think the sky's the limit as far as however big you want to dream in the NCAA tournament. Like, you can do it because, I mean, I put myself in this boat. I doubted this team going into it. I picked Auburn in every single show I went on last week, and it was a bunch. I'm like, I think Auburn loses close. And it was a similar song that we've seen be sung up until like a few minutes left in the game. And there was like 5 or 6 minutes left. And it's just, they're exchanging threes, they're exchanging fast breaks. And it's like, what is happening? Like Daryl said, this is pure cinema in the post-game show. And it was. It's like, what are we watching? Like, this is basketball, like greatness that we're seeing from both of these teams. But then something that we saw at the end of this game was different from what we've seen from Auburn teams in Tuscaloosa over the past few years, is they answered. And you had Tahad Pettiford, a true freshman, close the freaking game out. And I think when you have a guy like that who just does not care about your feelings, does not care about how big the moment is, in fact, he craves it. And there's a lot of folks that train for that moment, Lindsay. There's a lot of folks out there that say, hey, yes, I want to be the guy in that moment. But Tahad Pettiford lives it every single day. When the moment is big and the game is on the line, Tahad Pettiford finds a way to answer.
Of his 13 points, 11 were in the second half, like 4 for 6 from the field after halftime. And I remember like seeing that run of Alabama and they tied up. And what's the first Auburn points to take the lead back? Pettiford 3-pointer. Something where he just like he's facing Sears and Holloway a lot in that half, and they just cannot seem to figure out how to defend him. He's a young player, but he comes off the bench and just, I'm not gonna say beats Aiden Holloway, but like is more impressive than the other 5-star guard on the floor at that given time. And it just was, it was impressive. And like you can make that kind of case about so many guys, right? Janai Broome early, the first couple minutes of the game, it was just like he was like 8 points, a defensive stop, and assist in like the first 4 minutes. You can look at like Denver Jones just kind of being clutch on defense and locking dudes down, and second most points of the team. Like there's just so much that every single player just about was able to contribute. I'd be surprised if there was more than maybe 2 or 3 guys who were negative in the plus minus. It just felt like almost everybody on Auburn's team had a role in that win.
Yeah, Chris Moore plus 17 in 9 minutes of action. That was insane. Chris Moore's got a lot of haters in the Auburn fan base, and I think he does a lot of the dirty work that people don't want to give credit for, and so I was really pumped for him in that moment. Yeah, there was a tweet I was trying to find. I had it pulled up, and I can't find it anymore. But like you look at what Tahad Pettiford has done against these elite teams. Against Houston, 7 of 12 for 21 points. I'm having to do this on the fly here. Iowa State, 5 of 10 for 14 points. And I think a lot of that was in the second half. I don't have that in front of me. Against Duke, he was 8 of 15 for 20 points. I think he had 3 or 4 threes in that game. He was 4 of 8 from 3 in that game, which is stupid. Purdue, he had 18 points. Against Tennessee, only 8, but think about how hard it was to score points in that game. Like 8 points in that Tennessee game is the equivalent of scoring like 18 to 20 in a normal game. It feels like. Yes.
I have, as of this morning, as of Sunday morning, I have his cumulative stats versus ranked teams for you if you want that.
Give it to me.
14.8 points per game.
Okay.
On 48% from the floor, but 43% from 3. 2.5 assists per game on 21 minutes of action. He's shooting greater than 43% from 3 against ranked teams. Like there's a reason Auburn has more quad 1 wins than any other 2 schools in the country put together. And it's things like that where these guys are getting better when they face better opponents. Like at this point, part of you almost kind of thinks that like any game against a top 10 team is really kind of a toss up, right? Like anybody can win that game. But it feels like that 15 to 25 team has no shot against Auburn, but you get some sort of like, back of the SEC team and who knows what's going to happen. But like Pettiford's been amazing against ranked teams. All these dudes just stepped their game up in crunch time and against great teams. And we saw it again on Saturday where the end of that game was not nearly as close as you thought it would be when it was tied halfway through the second half.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time.
Just how intense was the home environment for Purdue when the Badgers knocked them off?
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers.
You were at the Purdue game. I want to start here. We got a bunch of questions. One of the ones I got again and again and again was, what was that environment like?
Ryan, it's so great to be back, my dude. It's been a little bit too long for us, quite honestly. So I will say this, and then I'll kind of go right to that answer. Been at Mackey a couple times now, and it is a place that truly lives up to the hype. It is like people might not love this in Wisconsin, but a Hilton Coliseum at Iowa State, Fog Allen at Kansas. It is really in that upper echelon. And in terms of noise, it's interesting because before the game, it's almost like a party. Like they've got this in-house DJ that is truly phenomenal, like kind of playing a bunch of the hits that you maybe think of now, but also, late 80s, 90s, kind of some of those pump-up songs, early 2000s. Mr. Brightside was playing. That's one of my favorites. But it's interesting. Then the game starts, and it's like it comes down a little bit. So it's just a little bit quiet early on. But then whenever Wisconsin has the rock, it gets pretty loud because they're obviously trying to throw you off. One of my favorite things, Ryan, about that place that I haven't seen anywhere is, let's say there was like a questionable foul on Trey Kaufman-Renn in their eyes, right? They have these extra video screens, I think 4 of them throughout the arena, and it's playing like a Charles Barkley gif that's just like, like kind of questioning it. It was quite funny. So I'm a fan of Mackey. I actually respect Matt Painter and that program a ton, just as Coach Gard does. And, it was a really cool trip. Obviously, a little more fun to cover a win.
And we get this question here. This one's from Mr. October. Compare the Mackey environment to the Kohl Center. I don't say Camp Randall, but the Kohl Center. Where are they alike? Where are they different?
Mm-hmm. So alike, very passionate, obviously. I think we can agree for a couple years, Kohl Center at Wisconsin was not what we expect, what it should have been. And I think the last year or two, it's been getting kind of a little more upward. It can be very loud. The actual setting is a little bit similar. They both have the students kind of lined up like on top of each other, which is good, but they're a little bit, I would say, closer to the floor at times in Mackey. At least it feels like it. Certainly a larger student section. But I think one thing I'd say is different that can be improved, I would say, at the Kohl Center throughout time is there's just a little bit more kind of in-game reactions or entertainment at Mackey that really just keeps you plugged in. Like there were a couple media breaks. I was focusing, even writing a little bit just because of kind of some of the fun and intensity of the competitions.
How big is this win? Is this the best win for the Badgers this year?
Without a doubt, Ryan. I mean, I'm fortunate, I'm a little bit of an optimist, obviously, and many know that. So I did go on a couple shows, no podcast rivals or anything, but a little bit of TV I got the chance to do, and just some radio hits, and I did pick Wisconsin. So like I was optimistic because of the matchups, I can honestly say, but I think this was huge. And man, you watch everything like me when you get time. So if you saw some of any of our coverage from the media that was there, or Badger men's basketball Twitter after, like, it was ho-hum. It's just another game, let's focus in going into it. But after, man, you could feel the excitement, the exuberance. There was the whole Cam McGee extra level, which maybe we will touch on. But this was a huge win. And now my only concern, my only one, because I just wrote a little column today that now I'm thinking about starting even larger, thinking about big ideas for this March run. There can't be a letdown about a day and a half from now against the Illini, because we know I would still put their talent level along with anybody in the conference.
Yeah, we've already watched the Fighting Illini against Wisconsin this year, and it wasn't a great outcome. I want to hit you with this, because that was a comment somebody said too. Like, is it possible this team starts reading their own press clippings a little bit? Is it possible this team does have a letdown? I kind of don't think so. I think this team is veteran enough. I think they're well coached. I think enough guys on this team have a taste of what happened against JMU last year that it still is kind of in the back of their heads. But is that the one thing that you're worried about? Or one of the things I wrote down in my notes here is, what's the one nit to pick with this team? What still maybe concerns you a little bit? Is that it, or is there something else?
Kind of a two-parter. So I would say that is possible, of course, for any college team, but I don't see it happening. I think that these guys are so veteran-led. I think that, like you mentioned, they experienced last year, like the team has kind of, lost some games they shouldn't in late February, early March. I don't think this group is going to do that. if they do lose to the Illini, I won't just call it a letdown unless they lose by like 22 or something, right? Because Illinois is still a pretty good team. They are very, very talented. Underwood is a solid coach. I think he's a better recruiter than an in-game coach, but he does just fine. And in terms of kind of my biggest concern, it would still probably just be depth at the 5. I mean, I'm really nitpicking because for a while it was like depth at playmaking positions like a 1. And now Kamari McGee has shown what he can do. Jack Janicki, could argue the 9th or 10th man, just looked like a, honorable mention All Big Ten guard at that place at Mackey. I'm not worried about that. Not even as worried about kind of guarding star post players because, yeah, Trey Kaufman-Renn got his, obviously. But nobody else really did. I think the defense really keyed in on guards, obviously, like Braden Smith. So that'd probably be it, Ryan. I wrote it, man. I'm not picking them to be, winning the Natty. But here's the thing. I'm at the point where if you told me in 5 weeks this team is a 2 seed and they're headed to San Antonio for the Final Four, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, I love it. And I think they can shoot their way into that, which is incredible. But they've raised the ceiling of expectations. For me, the only real concern I have is running into the bad matchup, which is true for just about every team. Like there are certain matchups, big physical perimeter defensive teams that are going to give us a few issues. But every team has to worry about running into the wrong matchup. So I think this team is really good, man. And to pivot from that, I want to ask you, what's the best storyline this year? Is it – because here's the – I've asked this to a bunch of people, and people will say it's Carter Gilmore, incredible storyline. It's Kamari McGee. It's John Tonje. Remember what he did last year in injury-plagued season? He was not a heralded transfer portal guy. People will say it's Greg Gard. People will say it's fill in the blank, man. What is the best storyline with this team?
Man, there are a lot of problems, Ryan. I personally would say it is Coach Greg Gard. I mean, I was just talking with some other media members, and I think we are pretty grateful to cover a head coach like him because I really do think he does things the right way and really kind of cares, at our media pressers and things of that nature. But in terms of this team, like, how some fans were acting last year. And people are, fans are fans, but people are naive. Like, I'm not even fully into the levels of the portal, but like coming at him and the staff for some of those portal losses, I can tell you they can't just be printing money, So like that stuff isn't falling on the staff and just the way he hasn't just kind of pushed that behind. But now, I mean, Coach Gard is evoking National Coach of the Year buzz. Like that's a fact from national reporters that I trust. Do I think he's going to win it? I'm not sure. We'll see kind of how this finishes. But just that fact, and like you mentioned it perfectly, Ryan, Tonje was not a heralded transfer. Blackwell was supposed to take a jump, but maybe not be a star yet. Winter was still young. Nobody knew what like one of our guys, Carter Gilmore, would be like this year and things like that. Jack Janicki. So I personally think it's him. I think he's writing a phenomenal story with this group. I put on my board, you can feel the love and passion that he has for this team. Like, give Greg Gard maybe a star, like Tonje's for sure a star, but maybe 1 star and a bunch of guys that just buy into their roles. I think of some of his early teams where I was, still in college, covering. Like, that's kind of where he makes his money, where he kind of finds his bread and butter, leading a group that buys in. It's about we, not about me. I actually believe that about this team. And that is why, man, I really think they're going to end up on the 2 or 3 line, Ryan, which is just crazy even for me to say.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And I think you're right, by the way. I think it is Gard. We talked a little before the show. You talk about all those great storylines. They're all spokes on a wheel, and the hub is Greg Gard. It all connects to Greg Gard, man. And I think what he's done is incredible this year. So I agree with you.
Did Craig Smith just save his job?
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes.
Alex, talking about Craig Smith has been a conversation that normally gets dominated by, this is his last year. Utah basketball's not in a good place. And I think that was the biggest thought that most people had going into the season. But anytime you beat a top 20 team, and especially anytime you beat a team like Kansas, I think it sparks conversation. And this conversation is, hey, anytime you beat a program like that, is that enough to save your job when you're on the hot seat? I will say I think it could be not an isolated thing. Well, see how the rest of the season ends. But I do think this win has the potential to be one of the reasons Craig Smith could keep his job after this year. How do you view the situation?
I would probably agree with you, right? Because this is, even though it's kind of a down year for Kansas, it's still a top 25 win. It's still a win where you bring in one of the true blue bloods, one of the most recognizable brands in college basketball into your home, and you're able to knock them off in a big upset win. I think that's a big win. That's a huge win that Utah can potentially ride that momentum on and finish the season strong. And I think it's going to come down to that, whether we have that conversation of, oh, is Craig Smith gone? Is Craig Smith going to stay? Will they retain him? The future of Craig Smith, I think, depends a lot on how the Utes are able to finish this season. This 74-67 win over the number 17 in the country, it's big, it's huge, and it has the potential to really help Craig Smith, but it also comes down to finishing strong, right? If Utah goes on and loses the remainder of their schedule, which I'm not saying they will, or I don't think that they will, but if it does happen, right, they lose out the rest of their schedule and they don't have a strong showing in the Big 12 tournament, then we're having a different conversation, JT. But the fact that this is a Utah team who, was in the preseason was predicted to be at the bottom, to be the worst team in the Big 12 standings, right? But you're actually sitting at 6-8. That's something to build on, and I think, like I said, with a strong finish, we're probably having a different conversation about whether Craig Smith stays or goes.
If Utah can win 5 of their last 6 games and make some noise in the Big 12 tournaments, in a year that was supposed to be like where I would thought they'd finish closer to 16. That was what everyone predicted, like you said, the preseason poll. If Utah can finish inside the top 10 or just around there, if they finish in the top 12, win a couple games in the tournament, yeah, they'll probably miss the NCAA tournament. But I do think there's a lot of reason and momentum to think then, okay, maybe we should keep Craig Smith. I look at it like this. I think Craig Smith is a good basketball coach. I think he has made some recruiting mistakes for sure. Not all of his picks have panned out, guys he's brought in, but he often puts his team in position to win. I don't really feel like Utah gets out coached a lot. Also said this before, Alex. I don't think Utah basketball is the easiest place to win right now. You could look at Larry Kostoviak not working out. You could now look at Craig Smith. It hasn't gone to playing perfectly, and that's 2 coaches. So is that 2 coaches not doing enough? Yeah, part of the reason is that, but I also think it's a basketball problem. Utah's lost out on recruits before. They've gotten outbid in NIL. It's not always the most supported sport, too, just in the atmosphere and with things of that nature, too. So we know the football team gets all the love, and there's nothing wrong with that. But basketball doesn't even really get a fraction of what football gets, too. So I do think there are a lot of reasons that make this job a difficult one. So I look at this situation and go, hey, if this is a Utah team that goes on a run to end the year and Craig Smith is looking like he can build something, why would you move on from that just to restart?
100% agree. And I think ultimately, and this goes across any sport, not just the sport of basketball, but winning solves a lot of problems. Winning solves a lot of issues. And I think that if like I said, unless Utah loses out the rest of their schedule, then it's a different conversation. But if Utah can finish strong, collect some good wins, collect some maybe a couple wins in the tournament and make some noise in the Big 12 tournament, winning solves your problem. And I think in order for Utah basketball to not have this conversation of, oh, they're going to be put on the back burner, or, oh, people don't care as much about Utah basketball, is you got to start winning. You have to start winning meaningful basketball games, right? Not just beating up on Colorado or Oklahoma State, who, to be frank, aren't good teams in the Big 12. But this win against number 17, it's a great start. It's a phenomenal start to start winning, quote unquote, more meaningful basketball games and to start building some more consistency. You start winning games, you start attracting better recruits, then it's a whole different story for Craig Smith. But I still think that this is a program that has a long way to go.
I agree. And I think that Craig Smith still could be maybe the guy that gets it back. I'm not trying to overreact to one win. I'm just saying I think Craig Smith's a good basketball coach, and I think those are harder to find than people think. He was very successful at Utah State. He's had some struggles at Utah. Like I said, I think some of that is on some of the players he's chosen to bring in. There's been some hits and some misses, but also it's not like this year and last year's success and failures. It's not an apples to apples comparison. Last year, for this team to not make the tournament with Brandon Carlson, Devontae Smith, some of these things that happened, like it was a massive disappointment. But it was also because you couldn't do it in the Pac-12. To be doing what Utah is doing this year in a conference as tough and as daunting as the Big 12, they deserve some love and some credit for that. Like, let's also, if we start to look through Craig Smith's resume, right? He's done well against BYU. He's got a couple wins against the Cougars in the past. Going to have an opportunity to get one in Provo. That's a huge game. It's probably the biggest game he has left on his regular season schedule. I think the first round of the Big 12 tournament is a must-win game for Craig Smith. If you lose that game, because you're not going to play one of the top teams based on how the top teams usually get the bye, or they do get the bye. So if you play some of those teams and you middle of the pack team and you don't look like you belong with them, that's where it could get problematic. But this is a guy who helped Utah upset a top 5 Arizona a couple years ago. Mentioned doing well against BYU, beat that BYU team recently too, and now just knocked off a Kansas team too. The wins are there. I still feel like when you watch Craig Smith out there, like, hey, he's a good coach. They make good adjustments in game, get some most out of most of his guys, even if he's made some recruiting mistakes. I still think he's got a really good shot to be this. I still think he's got a shot. I won't say really good. I still think he has a shot to be this team's head coach. And I think a lot of people wrote him off, but a win against a top 20 team has that much momentum to kickstart what could be enough dominoes falling that lead to Craig Smith returning next year.
Couldn't agree more, JT. Couldn't agree more. And we've seen the success of Craig Smith in the past. Maybe hasn't 100% translated yet to Utah basketball, but like I said, with a little bit more consistency, that's a conversation that can quickly change for Craig Smith.
And regardless of how you feel about Craig Smith, can we all just be fired up and happy? And I think pretty much everyone I've seen is, right? Like, Utah just beat Kansas. That's awesome. To beat one of the blue bloods in the sport is fantastic. Shout out to Gabe Madsen becoming the all-time leader in most made threes by a Utah player for his career. That was incredible to see. I mean, to light it up 5-13 from downtown, 24 points to lead Utah there. I was impressed with Keanu Dawes. I know he didn't score it well. I mean, only 2 points, but to get 10 rebounds, like, he was getting after it too. Jake Wallen, a double-double out there as well. Ezra Assar, we knew he was going to show up in this game too. This team continues to fight. They continue to make plays. They really limited Hunter Dickinson. I mean, only 12 points on 12 shots too. This was just a fun game to watch, and it was awesome. Just like I said, Alex, like, just appreciate, hey, one of our teams beat one of the best programs in college basketball. That just brings a smile to my face.
Absolutely. Anytime any local team is able to pull off an upset like this, it's always fun to watch. And I think it makes it a little bit more fun in the case that this is, personally, I think this is one of the best, if not the best, performance we've seen from this Utah basketball team all season long. And so, again, it's just, how do you build off of that? How do you carry that momentum into Kansas State this next week on Tuesday? And then how do you continue to build off and pick up those wins?
No, you're right. It is Kansas State. They got them coming up. It's actually going to be on Monday, the 17th. So you got Kansas State first, then take on UCF. Those are very winnable games. Kansas State's tough, but you get them at home. Like, that's where we want this team to trend that direction. Win the tough game. UCF, beat them, win on the road. It's a long road trip, but still got to win that. At top 15 Arizona, that's going to be tough. Just compete. Don't have a Houston showing. Have something much more akin to what you did against Kansas, or even against, at one point when Utah played, I think at one point when they played Baylor early on in the season, Utah did lose to them in a close game, like not the 76-61. I guess that one wasn't as close. There were parts of it I thought Utah was in it. But anyway, then after that, the Arizona State, West Virginia, BYU, like I said, win 5 out of those 6 games, win some games in the tournament. I think you're building momentum, heading in a positive direction. Let us know below how you guys think Utah's going to end the regular season. If you think Craig Smith and this team are going to be able to turn it around.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
I at least got exactly what I wanted out of Sunday's All-Star game.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast.
I'll tell you what, Andy, my highlight of All-Star Weekend came, what was it, around 3:30 or so, when we learned that LeBron wasn't going to play. Because in year 22, I am far more concerned about anything that might keep him from being able to finish the season healthy, particularly with the Lakers looking like they might have something to play for now going into the spring. If his ankle and his foot's feeling a little squishy, sit down. I do not need to watch him play the All-Star game. The league doesn't need it. Nobody needs it. I was super excited to see that he wasn't playing, other than, I guess, residual concern that he might be injured.
That's what I was going to say. I am only about 90% of the way with you, 80 to 90%. I get what you are saying conceptually. However, the whole reason he's not playing isn't because, for pragmatic reasons, even if LeBron was perfectly healthy, there's really no reason that somebody who's 40, season 22, should be in this game at all. There was a tangible reason he was sitting out. The ankle that keeps causing him periodic problems this season and connected to issues over the last few seasons was acting up. Like, that does put a bit of a damper on the excitement or pleasure that you were experiencing from this. And I do think it is worth acknowledging LeBron didn't just make a decision because he came to Jesus and realized, like, what the hell are we doing? This was, I don't think I can get through it, or I could get through it, but I'm really worried about how I feel the next few days.
I think it's much more the latter. Like, I could do this. Like,
I'm sure
if this was,
if the All-Star game was a playoff game, I'm sure he'd be
playing.
It would mean more people would watch.
I shouldn't be doing this. I don't need to be doing this. Doing this is counterproductive to the larger goal.
Yes.
We'll get deeper into some of this stuff and just, the reaction to the format. But like, when you talk about the All-Star game generally, one of the things I think that de-emphasizes it for players is the fact that nobody cares about All-Star games. I mean, Laker fans are obviously have great memories of Kobe's All-Star MVP games and stuff like that. But broadly speaking, nobody cares or remembers anything about All-Star games. And this is what all that matters is how far you go in the playoffs and whatever. If you're somebody in the league, the count the rings culture is such that, okay, if all that matters are titles, then everybody who's, Anthony Edwards apparently had a bad groin and sat out. Like, nobody should play in this game if they're feeling, because we're just going to bleep on them as a basketball culture if they don't win titles or they get hurt. And nobody's going to be like, you know what, but Anthony Edwards or LeBron played in that All-Star game when they were feeling a little under the weather.
Well, this is also the push-pull that comes with the idea of what is good for the league. And, it would be great for the league if we'll get into some of the formatting and whatnot in the All-Star weekend in general. But obviously, in a vacuum, it would be great for the league if the All-Star weekend carried a lot of cachet. But what really is great for the league is when the playoffs are awesome for multiple rounds. And it means much more, forget just to LeBron and his legacy and to the Lakers, it means more to the league when guys like LeBron are playing in the playoffs. It also, too, and this is something no owner will ever admit publicly, but I guarantee they all think privately, they care much more about their players being available for the playoffs when they're paying these guys anywhere from 30 to 50 to 60 or whatever $1 million a season. You commit to those guys because you want them available in the postseason. Frankly, none of these owners, if you gave them truth serum, gives a rat's ass if their players are in this event because they know nobody remembers. And then in the meantime, LeBron, in providing the explanation, said that he, quote, was hoping it being his ankle would feel a lot better this morning, but it is not where I wanted it to be. With 30 games left and us trying to make a playoff push in the wild, wild west, it felt like it was very important for me to take care of myself and understand what's coming, down the stretch. The only thing I guess I would be critical of towards LeBron, if at all, would be if he's wondered for a few days whether Because I imagine LeBron takes, similar to Kobe, similar to Jordan, guys before him, takes his stature seriously.
Well, he said this is the just staggering statistic here for a moment. First All-Star game since 2004 that LeBron didn't play.
Right.
First since 2004 that the man didn't play. And his reaction to that was, I hated it. Like the idea of him not playing. And he said, like, this was, it's a quote from LeBron. I won't say it's maintenance, but it is maintenance. At the same time, I have to look out for myself when it comes to this injury that I've been dealing with for years. And he's coming back and he's rehabbing in LA today. It's not a maintenance thing, but it's a maintenance thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how long he has been feeling about this, even understanding he feels a responsibility if he can to participate, it would have been nice to decide this with enough time for somebody like, say, Norm Powell, who I think was having an all-star caliber year for the Clippers. And this is likely, or quite possibly at the very least, Norm Powell's best shot at making an all-star team. So for someone like Norm Powell, it could have meant a lot to be a part of that game, because his likelihood of being this strongly in the running again is small. I remember when we covered the Kobe Powell teams, there was a year where it was the year that Lamar Odom ultimately won Sixth Man of the Year, but he was having such a strong year, even off the bench, that he was considered a dark horse candidate that year, 2011, to make an all-star team. And I remember you and I, in particular, very openly advocating for him, because we thought, A, he deserved it, but B, we recognized, and Lamar even talked about this, he isn't likely going to get another shot. And this means something to Lamar or a Norm Powell that's different to a guy like LeBron, even if LeBron, I'm sure, appreciates it. And that's why he waited this long to ultimately make a decision. That's maybe the only thing I would criticize of LeBron's, without knowing all of the details. Otherwise, 100% behind him.
Yeah, I mean, which thing is more important? I mean, you mentioned it before, but which thing is more? One is more important to the league, and I think it's fair to say that LeBron James, over the course of 20 plus years, has been a very strong advocate for the league. He has understood the bigger picture. He has seen, what is, nobody's perfect. There was this stuff about China a few years ago, but whatever. In the end, if the league could get every star in every generation to be as much of a team player for the promotion of the league as LeBron has been for the NBA, then they'd be thrilled. And so I think he probably figured he could get out there and do it and whatever, and woke up on Sunday and it was like, but you're right. But this, talk about this after
mildly critical.
Mildly. And I think this is another thing where the league ought to be able to need more players on this team. It's I understand they have injury replacements. I understand in a normal format with a normal game, it is hard to get 15 players in and make it look like a real game. But at the same time,
it's the least of the format's problems.
Right. And it's baseball gets through this with the All-Star game, and it's kind of dumb, but everybody plays and it's whatever. They need to make the rosters bigger, and there should be a little more consideration for guys like Norm Powell, because ultimately there are legacy stars that make it because that's what people want to see. And both things can be true at the same time, which is the problem with all-star games.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
three primary cuts of Kendall Fuller, Raheem Mostert, and Durham Smythe.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast.
And these are the kinds of moves that you have on that first slide when you're talking about just basic trimming of the fat off of the roster from a salary perspective for performance and age and cap costs and cap savings and so on and so forth. This is, I think, unequivocally for all three of these players, the biggest storyline is the juncture and where they are at in their career, alongside the salary cap savings and the salary cap cost for a team that, they need to start shaking up the roster a little bit, and they need a youth movement in a big way, because in the heart of this build that really is over. I think people are going to continue to talk about, it's year 7 of the rebuild. The rebuild was over 2 years ago. And now you finished out this life cycle of the football team. And then whether it is aligning with the pressure to win internally or externally or not, this is a transition period. And I think these kinds of cuts affirm that this is a transition period. And that's why I want to start with Kendall Fuller, because Kendall Fuller, a team moved on from Xavier Howard. And I know there were some that were pretty bummed out that the team moved on from Xavier Howard in favor of Kendall Fuller. Well, Xavier Howard sat at home last year, right? I don't know how much better your experience would have been with Xavier Howard with an even more expensive player who has been shown to be very business-oriented and would not be the kind of player that you would expect would play ball about readjusting a contract in a way that brings the dollar amounts that he's receiving down, because there's been multiple times he's signed contracts and before he's gotten halfway through it, he's asked for more money. So I think that was a damned if you do and damned if you don't type scenario for the Dolphins at corner with Xavier Howard, who the team moved on from last offseason as a post-June 1st cut, signed Kendall Fuller to a 2-year, it was like a 2-year, $15 million contract to bring him in and be the CB2. And I thought for the first 3 quarters of the season when Fuller was on the field, he was fine. Now, he didn't have any interceptions. He narrowly missed a few. He got his hands on the fewest footballs he's gotten his hands on since 2019 was the last time Kendall Fuller had as few total passes defense as what he did this year. He just turned 30 years old, like 4 days ago. He played 556 snaps. That's about half of the defensive snaps available across the course of the season. So you have an age 30 corner who showed a regression last year, had multiple concussions, had an additional injury as well, played half the snaps, had a salary cap figure that was north of $8 million. The challenge was, are you going to open up an additional need on your roster in the midst of all of the needs that you know you're going to have to address in some way, shape, or form, whether that's bringing players back on low salaries, or whether that's draft picks, or whether that's spending big at a position to bring somebody from the outside in to kind of serve as a cornerstone in the way that you did with like Jordan Brooks and Aaron Brewer last year. And the fact that this team was willing to take a little over $2.75 million in savings to open up the cornerback 2 vacancy should tell you everything you need to know about, yes, there is pressure to win. Yes, there is a hot seat element of how Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel are going to go about their business this season. But if you were just going to say 2026, we're going to throw caution to the wind, we need 2025. I don't think you're moving on from Kendall Fuller to save less than $3 million in cap savings. And I know some Dolphins fans had the questions of with almost $5.5 million in dead cap, why would you not do Kendall Fuller as a post-June 1st cut? Why would you do this up front? And I think that answer is twofold. And unless you're talking about a very big dollar amount, I think all of the hits that the Dolphins should take should probably be upfront, front-loaded type of cap hits and taking all the dead money this year. The first reason is if you designate as a post-June 1st cut, you don't get credit for any cap savings until June 2nd. So for a team that's over the threshold for the cap, and for a team that is probably thinking about competing short term while simultaneously transitioning the roster with simultaneously resetting their books in some degree for 2026, so they have a better cap health perspective looking forward. I don't want to keep kicking $4.5 million for Kendall Fuller down the can for 11 games that was played 2 years ago. I'll take the hit now. I'll get credit for almost $3 million in savings that I can actually sign a player on the roster in the first or second wave in free agency. And then my books are clear for 2026. If you told me that they post June 1st at Kendall Fuller and you have to carry an $8 million cap hit for Kendall Fuller until June 2nd, and then you're going to carry $4.5 million in dead money in 2026, I'd be pissed. Now, you want to do that for whether that's Bradley Chubb feels like the one that's the most likely post-June 1st candidate here because they did something similar with Xavier Howard last year, and they got it was $18.5 million in cap space. And for Bradley Chubb, you can do that and get $19 million. And if you do that, that can serve as your post-June 1st free agency wave fund. It can serve as your fund for making sure you have cap space to sign your draft picks. And it can make sure you have operating cap throughout the season to handle if we have an injury and we have to sign somebody from the outside in to come in and step in and fill an injury for us. And your practice squad fund, and then when it's all said and done, that practice squad dollars is like $5 million in cap space you need for guys on the practice squad throughout the course of the season. So if you want to do something with that, like Bradley Chubb, when the savings pre-June 1st is less than $1.5 million, okay, I get it. But to sit here and rub pennies together for an extra $4.5 million in cap savings in 2025 that you can't touch for 3 months when you need cap compliance, it's just a dollar amount that I don't think justifies it in any way, shape, or form. But what I didn't know is, if I were in their shoes, do I want to open an additional roster need by moving on from Kendall Fuller for a modest cornerback salary? Their answer is yes. Which, for if you're really ready to make assumptions that 2025, they don't care about long-term health, that move flies directly in the face of that and should tell you otherwise. Because it opens up another roster need in addition to making a move with 2026 books in mind by not designating as June 1st. And there was a necessity to get the cap savings now.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
It is not sure we're going to see hockey as good as that USA-Canada game for a long time.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers.
Russ, it is 4 nations in high gear right now. I am coming to you from Boston prior to the final doubleheader day on Monday. And it has been, I think, a really fascinating tournament so far. I think started off a little questionable. I don't know what is happening here. Like, is this going to be good? And it has ramped up to 11, I think.
It did. The only thing is with the 3 fights, I went back and I had interviewed Ron Wilson, Paul Holmgren, and Mike Richter when they all were going into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame and talked about the 96 World Cup. And Ron Wilson said before that game started, right at the faceoff, he told Joel Otto to go and cross-check Eric Lindros and see what happens. That was the quote.
Right.
See what happens. And then everything got combustible. Now, not to the point where there were 3 fights like this, but this is the same playbook because Bill Guerin was on that team. Keith Kachuk was on that team.
Right. I mean, there's a little bit of history repeating itself. That,
Yeah.
of course, is about the USA Canada game that was on Saturday. And
Right.
that was definitely the highlight of the tournament so far. I think, as Flyers fans looking at it, I feel like we're either going to get Sanheim or Konechny in a game.
Yeah, you're never getting both.
Never getting both here. We will see. We'll talk a little bit more about Monday's games in the next segment. And we'll get to our nemesis of the week and a poll for this week coming up later in the show. Of course, Travis Sanheim checked into the lineup for the injured Shea Theodore. And Travis Konechny was sat in that game versus the U.S. For Bennett, who was very involved in that fighting at the beginning of the game, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Probably next game, because it's do or die, they're going to keep the same lineup. I expect them, except McCarr will probably draw in, and Harley will probably
We'll
go home.
see.
Oh yeah, that's the question.
Right. And so I did see Cale McCarr skating, at the optional. There weren't many guys out there. So it was basically him and Jarvis out there that I saw. So it was, it's definitely a question. But, as head coach John Cooper said, Cale McCarr is a competitor and he wants to be in the game. And so he's doing everything to get himself into the position to be able to play. It'll be a game time decision, but we'll see for their game against Finland coming up today. But all of that aside, I think we can talk more about that USA Canada game a little bit there. With I thought it was interesting, with Bennett in the game, like that fourth line with Brad Marchand and Jarvis was essentially a bruiser line in a lot of ways, but with a high skill attached to it.
Right. Yeah, because Jarvis, that's not his game.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I
Right.
think there was some effectiveness, but then I felt Cooper fell victim to put, like, he had Jarvis in late in the game, and he
Yeah.
put him out there twice late in the game. And I was like, look, I know Seth Jarvis has a great shot, but that game was getting very physical, and I was surprised he stayed in that game instead of going with the bigger guys and the more known guys.
Right. And I think, I saw a lot of criticism of him and his choices that he made in terms of who to send out there and when, especially favoring the Tampa Bay Lightning players. So Point was out there, Sorelli was out there, Hagel and Point were out there for the OT, I think, when maybe they shouldn't have been.
That's fair. That's fair criticism, but we know it's going to go that way. Like, this is just
Sure.
part and
It's
parcel.
just, I think you have to say it, right?
You do. It's definitely part and parcel. And I just thought, I don't expect anything different. Like, he's not going to Cooper doesn't back down from anything. So he doesn't care what we think about that.
Right. Right. And I think, the other thing about that game was the way that Team USA was able to shut down Canada offensively. I mean, that was obviously the most important thing. And in my head, I was like, well, how much does Torts have to do with that in terms of the defensive style of play that they put out there?
I think a little, because he and Sullivan play similar systems. So I think a little I think a little bit of that. I think, we give credit to both, except, except for the McDavid goal. I mean, there was nobody.
Well, yes. I mean, McAvoy got smoked.
Yeah. I mean, people were like, oh, he should have been in better position. You can't move that fast laterally when the guy's going 21, 22 miles an hour. Like, you just can't. Doesn't matter who you are defensively. So that was nothing they can do. But after that, they got very physical. And this is where I think Torts only gets partial credit, because they got more physical than even a John Tortorella defense. They did.
Oh, sure.
And they were banging around everybody. And that's when Canada looked old. Marchand was getting hit. He didn't do anything. Marchand didn't do Marchand things. Crosby got hit off his skates. McDavid got crushed by McAvoy, probably because when he got smoked, he smoked him. I mean, there was very little retaliation from Canada. There was a few hits. Doughty got taken off his skates. Now, I know these guys came back from injury and some are banged up, but they're getting old compared to the U.S. team. And it showed on on the forward side for them and the defense playing those forwards for the U.S.
Yeah, I agree. Canada had about 4 expected goals in that game, and they scored 1. So that's a
Yeah.
combination of really good defense and great goaltending.
Oh,
And
yeah. Well, I mean,
that is
Hellebuck's the
exactly
best goalie in the tournament. Like,
right.
nobody was going to guess otherwise, and nobody was going to predict that he wouldn't be. So, yeah, I mean, that gives you an edge just going into the game and, and the tournament. So that's a big deal for the U.S. I know that first goal that Hellebuck gave up in the first game, people were like, uh-oh. And it's like, guys got to get warmed up.
He's not a guy I worry about in
No.
that circumstance. Now, Travis Sanheim played a little over 15 minutes of that game. He had to come into that game having not played in the first game, and it's a big game emotionally. And I think he did a solid job. I wouldn't say it was his best game I've ever seen from him, but I think given the circumstances and the adjustments and who he was defending, I think he did a solid job.
Yeah, I think he was pretty good. I saw him get lost in the zone once or twice in the third period, but I felt like he was good and he was a good enough fill in. Same with Harley. Both of them had to just kind of go in there.
Yeah.
Harley even with less preparation than Sanheim. So,
for sure.
I think they both did fine.
Yeah, I think so. Now, you are a noted Bennington defender.
I am.
And it seems like they're going to keep Bennington in.
They will. I mean, what is their option?
Cooper's being a little cagey about it because
he always is cagey about that.
I know they all are. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I think, an interesting thing that Travis Konechny said yesterday about Bennington, he said that he's a gamer. When you look at him, I played against him a bunch, and he's just one of those guys that's never quitting on plays. He's the last line of defense when you have that kind of confidence and you trust him out there. And he said, he's going to do something big and give us a big moment. And I think he did have a few of those big moments in that game. He just didn't have enough of those big moments.
Well, I mean, I think a lack of offense from Canada created bad moments for him. Like, that, what was it? The Larkin goal, Chris Pronger pointed it out even better than they did on the broadcast, saying that, hey, when you go for that long change, the other defenders got to cover the center of the ice, and they didn't. So they hung out Bennington to dry on that one. There was nothing he could do on that one. He did give up one bad goal, but guess what? I mean, Canada only scored 1 goal. So, he only gave up 3. It's not like, we're talking about a 5-goal game or something. So I don't think Bennington's the problem, and that's why I expect Cooper to go back to him. I think he is a battler. He may not be the prettiest goalie, but again, they passed on Thompson. They never spoke to him, so that's their problem. And then beyond that, what's really the option there? I think that's the issue, and that's why you go Bennington.
I mean, I don't think you're wrong. I just think there's also there's reason to think about making a different pick. I just don't know that they have a choice. I think you may be correct.
I mean, the best thing that could have happened to Canada is if they had a forward get hurt, they could have called Tom Wilson, who probably should have been there in the first place, who would have been able to police the U.S. in a lot of ways, and they're missing a guy like that.